My daughter disappeared on a Tuesday morning in October. She was 7 years old. She had pigtails, a missing front tooth, and a laugh that could fill an entire house. The police searched for months. Volunteers walked through forests and fields. Her face was on every telephone pole in the city, but they never found her, not a single trace, and the world just kept moving forward without her. If you enjoy emotional and suspenseful stories like this, make sure to subscribe to Francisko's Stories. Hit that bell so you never miss one. Her name was Lily. That was 5 years ago. 5 years of waking up and feeling the weight of it before you even open your eyes. 5 years of walking past her bedroom door and feeling your chest cave in. 5 years of telling yourself that today you will not cry. And then crying anyway. My name is Daniel, and I want to tell you what I found last spring, because I am still trying to make sense of it, and I think maybe if I say it out loud, it will finally feel real. After Lily vanished, my wife Sarah and I did what a lot of parents do after something like that. We broke. Not loudly, not all at once. We broke slowly, the way an old bridge gives out, one small crack at a time. We stopped eating dinner together. We stopped talking about the future. We stopped saying her name out loud because saying it felt like pressing on a bruise. Sarah went back to work after about 6 months. I understood that. Some people grieve by staying still, others grieve by moving. Sarah was a mover. She threw herself into her job at the research center where she worked. Long hours, sometimes weekends. I told myself she was coping. I told myself that was okay. But somewhere deep down, I felt something shift between us. A distance that was not just grief, something colder, something that did not quite make sense when I tried to examine it too closely. I stopped examining it. That was easier. For about 2 years, I barely left the house. I lost my job at the architecture firm because I could not focus. I could not draw a straight line without thinking about Lily. I started doing freelance work from home, small projects, just enough to get by. Sarah brought home the real income, and I told myself I was grateful. I told myself we were surviving, that surviving was enough. It was a Wednesday in March when everything changed, a gray, ordinary Wednesday, the kind of day that has no business being the day your entire life splits open. I'd finished a small design project early in the afternoon. I was feeling something I had not felt in a long time, something almost like energy, almost like the old me. I thought about calling Sarah at work, but then I had this idea. A spontaneous idea, something I had not done in years. I would surprise her at her office. I would bring coffee, 2 cups, the way we used to do before. Maybe we could take a walk. Maybe we could just sit together for 10 minutes and feel like 2 people who still belong to each other. I drove to the research center with 2 coffees in a cardboard holder. I felt almost nervous, like a first date. Stupid, I know. But grief does strange things to small moments. It makes them feel enormous. The receptionist at the front desk smiled and waved me through. She knew me. I'd been there before, years ago, when things were different. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor. Sarah's office was at the end of the hall, past a row of glass-walled meeting rooms. I walked down the corridor, nodding at a colleague of hers who passed me. He smiled, but there was something slightly odd about his expression, like surprise mixed with something else. I did not think about it. I reached her door. It was slightly open. I knocked softly and pushed it open. She was not there. The office was empty. Her coat was on the back of her chair, which meant she was somewhere in the building. I stepped inside to wait. I set the coffees down on her desk. I sat in the small chair across from her desk, the one meant for visitors. I looked around the office. I had not been there in a long time. There were no photos on her desk, no family pictures. I noticed that immediately, because we used to have photos everywhere. But I pushed that thought down. I pulled out my phone to text her, then I set it back down. And that is when I saw it. On the corner of her desk, half hidden under a folder, was a pen. A simple ballpoint pen, silver, with a dark blue cap. I almost did not pick it up. There was no real reason to. But something made me reach over. Something pulled my hand toward it the way you sometimes reach for things you do not understand. I turned it over. There, engraved in small, neat letters along the barrel, were 2 words. Lily's pen. I stopped breathing. I I stared at those letters for a long time, long enough that the room seemed to go very quiet around me, long enough that the coffee cup stopped steaming. Lily's pen. We had given Lily a set of engraved pens for her birthday that year, her 6th birthday. She had just started writing in cursive, and she was so proud of it. She practiced her name every single night before bed. We had 3 pens made for her, all silver, all engraved with those same 2 words, Lily's pen. We never found any of her belongings after she disappeared. Not her backpack, not her shoes, not those pens. My hands were shaking. I was gripping the pen so hard that my knuckles went white. I told myself there was an explanation. Maybe Sarah had kept one and never told me. Maybe she had it in a drawer and I just did not know. That would be strange, but grief makes people strange. But there was something about the way it was sitting there. Not in a drawer, not in a box. On the desk, under a folder, yes, but almost as if it had been moved recently, as if it had been used. I clicked the pen. Nothing came out, no ink. The tip did not extend. I clicked it again. There was a sound, a soft mechanical sound, but not the sound of a pen. It was deeper, a click that resonated slightly, like a latch. I looked up. On the wall behind Sarah's desk, there was a large built-in bookshelf, floor to ceiling, full of binders and research files and a few books. I had looked at it without really seeing it every time I visited. But now, the left section of that bookshelf was moving. It swung forward slowly, silently, like it had been designed to move exactly that way, balanced and precise. Behind it was a door, a real door with a handle set into the wall of what I had always assumed was a solid exterior wall of the building. I stood up. My chair scraped back and I did not even hear it. I walked around the desk. I stood in front of the door. I put my hand on the handle. I told myself to stop, to think, to call Sarah first, to call someone. But my body was already pushing the door open, because somewhere underneath the shock and the confusion, some part of me already knew. Some part of me had always known that something was wrong. The door opened into a small room, maybe 12 feet by 12 feet. There was soft lighting, the kind that comes from a lamp, not overhead fluorescence. There was a bed against one wall, neatly made with a pale yellow blanket. There was a small desk with books stacked on it, a shelf with stuffed animals, a drawing taped to the wall, a crayon drawing of a house and a tree and a sun, and sitting on the bed, holding a book open in her lap, was a girl. She looked up at me. She was 12 years old, or close to it. She had grown, her hair was longer, her face had changed the way faces change when children grow up without you. But I knew her. I knew her immediately, the way you know a song you have not heard in years, the way your whole body recognizes something before your mind catches up. It was Lily. She looked at me and her face went completely still. And then she said very quietly, "Daddy?" I cannot tell you exactly what happened to me in that moment. I can tell you that my legs stopped working. I can tell you that I went down onto my knees right there in the doorway. I can tell you that I made a sound I have never made before, and hope I never make again. Somewhere between a word and something that had no language at all. I crawled to her. I put my arms around her. She was real. She was warm. She was breathing. She started crying immediately. Hard, silent sobs, the kind children do when they have been holding something in for a very long time. I held onto her and I could not let go. After a while, I do not know how long, I pulled back and looked at her face. Her eyes were red. She looked frightened. Not of me, but frightened in a way that was deeper than that moment, a fear that had been living in her for a long time. I said, "Are you hurt? Are you okay?" She shook her head. "I'm not hurt." "How long have you been here?" She looked at me for a moment and then she said, "A long time." I looked around the room again. There was everything a child needed to survive. Food wrappers in a small bin, a bathroom door in the corner, books, many books, art supplies, but no windows, no way out except through the door I had just come through. I was still holding her hand when I heard footsteps in the office behind me. I stood up. I stepped back through the doorway. I kept Lily behind me. Sarah was standing in the middle of her office. She had dropped something. I heard it fall. Her face was the color of ash. We looked at each other across the room. I said her name, just her name. But I said it in a way that was really a question with no good answer. She put one hand over her mouth. I said, "Tell me." She did not move. "Sarah, tell me right now." She closed her eyes, and when she opened them, something in her had shifted, like she had made a decision. Like she had been waiting for this moment for years, and now that it was here, part of her was almost relieved. She sat down in her chair, and she told me. It started 5 years ago. Lily had not been taken by a stranger. She had been taken by a man named Victor Hale. He ran a private research foundation that funded Sarah's work. Sarah had discovered something about him, a financial fraud, evidence that he had been siphoning money from medical research grants and using it to fund something illegal. She had confronted him. She had threatened to go to the authorities. 3 days later, Lily disappeared. Victor Hale called Sarah the same night the police were searching for Lily. He did not threaten her. He did not need to. He simply told her where Lily was and what would happen if Sarah ever spoke. Lily was alive. He would keep her alive, as long as Sarah kept quiet and kept working and never told anyone, including me. I listened to all of this without speaking. I could feel something happening inside me, something very cold moving through my chest. I said, "You knew, this whole time." She said, "I didn't have a choice. She is your daughter." He told me if I went to the police, she would disappear for real. He said he had people everywhere. He said, "She is your daughter." My voice cracked on that. I could not help it. Sarah started crying. I was trying to keep her alive, Daniel. Every day I came here, I kept her alive. Every day I stayed quiet, she was safe. I fed her, I educated her, I kept her safe the only way I could. I looked around the room, at the coffee cups on the desk, at the bookshelf door still standing open, at the soft yellow light coming from inside. I said, "Why didn't you tell me?" She shook her head. "He said if I told you, you would go to the police. He said you wouldn't be able to stop yourself. He said he would know." Maybe I would have. And then what, Daniel? Then what? He had connections. He had money. He had people. I was alone. I stood very still for a long time. Then I said, "Where is he now?" "Victor Hale." Something crossed her face, something complicated. She said, "He died 8 months ago, heart attack. His organization collapsed without him. The people who worked for him scattered. I've been waiting to see if anyone was still watching, waiting to make sure it was safe." I stared at her. 8 months, I said. She looked down at her hands. "He's been dead for 8 months, and you did not tell me." Her voice was very small. I was scared. I did not know how to tell you. I did not know what you would do. I did not know if you would hate me. I walked to the window. I looked out at the gray March sky, at the cars in the parking lot below, at the ordinary world that had no idea. I heard Lily's footsteps behind me. She had come through the doorway. She stood a few feet back watching us. I turned around and looked at her. This girl who was my daughter, who was 12 years old, who had grown up in a hidden room behind a bookshelf without sunlight or open sky. She looked at me, then at her mother. She said very quietly, "Are you going to leave?" I did not answer right away. I looked at Sarah. I looked at my daughter. I thought about 5 years of grief, 5 years of a hollow house and a hollow marriage and a hollow version of myself. I thought about all the mornings I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee going cold in front of me and stared at the wall. I thought about the nights I stood in Lily's bedroom doorway and put my hand on the light switch and then did not turn it on. I thought about what Sarah had done, what she had carried, the impossible, terrible choice she had made and lived with alone. I thought about what I would have done in her place. I did not know. I still do not know. What I knew was that my daughter was standing 10 feet away from me, alive, looking at me with her mother's eyes in my nose and a fear in her face that no child should ever have to carry. I walked toward her. I crouched down in front of her so that we were the same height. I said, "I'm not going anywhere." She let out a breath, and she stepped forward and put her arms around my neck, We stood like that for a long time, the three of us, in that office with the hidden door still open, in the gray March light. What happened after that was a long, slow, painful process. We called a doctor I trusted before we called anyone else. Lily needed medical attention and evaluation after years of isolation. She was physically healthy, but there was so much work ahead, so much healing. I did eventually call the police. I told them about Victor Hale and what he had done. I told them about the network around him, what I knew of it. Investigations opened. Some things came to light that I cannot talk about publicly yet. I filed for separation from Sarah 2 months after that day. Not because I hate her. I have spent a long time thinking about hate, and I do not think what I feel is hate. I think it is something more complicated. Grief for the marriage we had before. Grief for the 5 years we lost. A recognition that trust, once broken in a certain way, does not simply repair itself because both people want it to. Maybe one day? I do not know. What I know is that Lily is with me now. She has a real bedroom with a window. She can see the sky. She is learning what it means to go outside whenever she wants. She is healing in the way that children heal, which is to say, slowly and also incredibly fast, and in ways that surprise you every single day. She still has one of those pens, the one from the desk. She keeps it on her nightstand. She told me she used to click it sometimes, late at night when she was scared, not to open the door, just because the sound reminded her that someone on the other side still remembered her name. I think about that a lot. I think about how a small object, a pen on a desk, a name engraved in silver, can hold more truth than years of silence. I think about how close I came to never finding her, how I almost did not go that day, how I almost chose to stay home. I am glad I brought the coffee. I'm glad I decided to surprise her. I'm glad that on an ordinary gray Wednesday, I did one spontaneous thing. Because ordinary days can change everything. Sometimes they take things away from you, and sometimes, if you are very lucky, they give something back. If this story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to Francisko's Stories for more. I will see you in the next one.